This morning, our topic will be the leadership impact of Shaul. We all know that he started out well. He started out good. So that's the part of his leadership that we will be studying this afternoon. Even though we know that he ended not so well in a tragedy, but still we can learn very important lessons from his ministry. Even when Shaul started as a leader, he was already showing some timidity. So Shaul was privileged to be the first king of Israel. So imagine that. God has called you to have that kind of privilege. For some people, they will be very excited to become the first ever king of Israel. But in the case of Shaul, it was very scary. Now, maybe it will also be very scary for a lot of us because remember, there was no king before him. And there was an expectation from people to have a king like just other nations. And they expect him to perform so well. So he came from the tribe of Benjamin, which was almost exterminated because of their moral corruption and rebellion. That is one of the saddest part of the history of Israel. If you'll just read Judges chapter 20 chapters 20 to 21. Actually, it started even before that. It was a tragedy. They almost the whole tribe almost ran out of men. And so they had to get some women, not from among the fellow Israelites, but from other tribes, so that their remaining men could have women to marry, and of course they could continue their tribe. So the tribe of Benjamin is located somewhere in the middle of the kingdom, so somewhere in between the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Part of the Jerusalem was occupied by the Benjamites. In fact, there's a gate in the north. It's called Benjamin's Gate. Even though God chose someone from this tribe of Benjamin, it is sort of a wonder why God did that. Okay, so the Lord gave Shaul a good start. He knew that it would be very scary thing for Shaul to be the first king of Israel after having a very good prophet or seer, Samuel, as the national leader. People really looked up to him. People really respected him. People really followed his leadership. They get messages from the Lord because of the leadership of Samuel, and having to meet the people's high expectations. Again, so was the Lord mistaken for choosing Shaul, who eventually failed as king? Because some people would make that question. If God is all-knowing, so why would he choose someone who will be a failure? Well, you could push the question, why did he ever created man in the first place when he knew from the very beginning that Adam and Eve would eventually fail? And that's why we're all sinners. But God wouldn't be stopped from doing what is good and accomplishing his good purposes just because some people will be failing God and would not be obeying him. Now, since this is a leadership examples, Shaul, I would also like to think about the upcoming elections. I'm not going to talk about really Philippine politics. I just want to draw some beautiful lessons from the leadership of Shaul, as we also try to think about the kind of leaders that we need to have. Because maybe it's easier for us to choose some national leaders because we know much about them. But we will also be having to choose in some places governors and city mayors and councilors. Sort of, it's kind of harder to choose those people because some of us don't know really who those candidates are. So as we elect the Philippines head of state on that's on May 9, Monday, not this coming Monday, next Monday, what leadership lessons can we learn from the good days of King Shaul? I have 3 points to share again. The first is the Lord had to change the heart of the king. That's very good. That's very important. You remember in Lead Like Jesus, we start with the heart. Why do we lead? Before we go to the being habits, before we go to the head, the hands, and the doing habits. It's because it is what is inside our hearts that will really lead us if we are going to be good leaders, whether we lead with pride or fear, or we lead with without that ego that edging God out, but we will lead by the right ego, which is exalting God only. Now, Shaul needed the Spirit of the Lord in order to lead the nation of Israel, which demanded the prophet Samuel to have a king like the other nations. Now, we're not going to go there with that reference. Let me just go to 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 9. So, when Shaul turned to leave Samuel, God changed his heart. Now, why did he leave? Because they met, and he was looking for the donkey. They were lost, but it was an appointment from God for Shaul to meet Samuel so that he will be anointed as king. Okay, God changed his heart. Now that is very important. God knew what to do with this man. Of all the people that he could choose, his choices, he chose this man. Okay, and all the signs came about that day. So what we can see here is that God knew that the first thing that he needs to change in this person is not the skills, it's not his physique, but it is his heart. And also as e-life leaders, whether you're also a family leader, a father, or a mother, whichever role you portray, you take, it is very important that we lead coming from our hearts. It's because people may see our skills, people may see our wisdom, but if our heart is not really toward them to give them love, they know that you're just leading without really loving. When Shaul and his servants arrived at Gibeah, a group of prophets met him. So a national leader must be changed by God in his heart first. He should not resist these changes. A change of heart is a very big requirement. If your heart is not with the people, then you cannot lead the people well. Okay? A changed heart is a very submissive heart and obedient to the Lord, because a leader needs to understand that it is God who is the real leader of the nation. Even Samuel knew that he was just a messenger of God. He was just a prophet of God, but it was God who was actually ruling Israel. But again, the people wanted someone just like a king, who owns the nation and who can control the people. And God was appalled, even though he knew that. Why would people choose rather that kind of a leader than he himself? And God is obviously a better leader than a human being, ruling and sort of having a palace. And he warned this in Deuteronomy, I think it's in chapter 17. He warned the people that if you want, one of these days you demand for a king, and these are the things that he will require of you. So they will have to lose a lot of things, and they will have to serve the king rather than the king serving them. But of course, God wanted the king to serve them. That's the kind of leader that God wanted them to have. The question is, can God use a resistant and cold-hearted leader? Now, at this time, maybe because as we will find out, Shaul was timid, and so it was easier for God to lead him, to change his heart. Now, you need also to understand that this is something miraculous. An encounter with God is a miraculous experience. Once you really seek God, at this time, Shaul wasn't really seeking for God. He was seeking for a donkey. But in God's plan, right? He knew that he can change this man's heart. Okay. Now we didn't read that part about the donkey, but that's actually the context of the story. But when God wants to change your heart, you got to appreciate what he's trying to do in your heart, because he's trying to do something good. And you would love the greater plan of God when he changed your heart first as a leader. So the Spirit of God came powerfully in him, and he prophesied along with them. A national leader must be empowered to speak and work by the Spirit of God. So the new leader must be someone like a prophet, just like Samuel. If you will try to understand how God has raised up leaders in the history of Israel, of course, he had their ancestor Avram, but at that time they were not a large nation. So technically, the first leader that they had as a big group of people was Moses. And you remember that Moses met a lot of resistance. He had to deal with a lot of rebels, but eventually he was able to lead them out of Egypt, and they arrived in Moab, and it was Joshua who led them inside the promised land and conquered the whole land. And God did not appoint any successor to Joshua, but he appointed judges. Okay, the reason why they're called judges is because they were supposed to judge the nations by their leadership. But they also uh, played the role as a spokesperson of God. So the new king had to become somewhat similar to that. There's the pattern. You have to be the spokesperson of God. Even though at this time, from the time of the kings, the office of the prophet remained. Okay, but not the office of the judge. It was he was replaced by the king, but the office of the prophet continued. So therefore, even the kings had prophets helping them out. So the prophets became the spokesperson of God. But since he was the new one, it was transitory. People would look up to the new leader if this leader would be a close person to God, just like Moses. So he must be able to prophesy, just like Moses. So God manifested His power in the life of Shaul by overpowering him and making him prophesy. Okay, so people were wondering, as the next verse would say. Everyone who knew him previously and saw him prophesy with the prophets asked each other, "What has happened to the son of Kish? Is Shaul also among the prophets?" Then a man who was from there asked, "And who is their father?" As a result, "Is Shaul also among the prophets?" became a popular saying. He was able to do that. But again, it was a sign from God to them that he would be one of the next leaders, and in fact, the king. Okay? So the people began to proclaim the changes they saw on the newly anointed king. That is Saul also among the prophets? That's a proclamation actually. It's not just a matter of question or a question of doubt. It's sort of a proclamation of we have a new leader here, a promising one, a very unlikely person, but we wonder why he would be an upcoming leader from among us. But that God is doing something great in our nation. So, a national leader must be changed by God in his heart, and a national leader must be empowered to speak and work by the Spirit of God. The second point is the king had to overcome his fears. Saul needed to understand that the Lord chose him, or someone like him, who is unique and from the tribe of Benjamin. So a while ago I said, in reference to Judges chapter 20 chapter 20 and 21, the whole tribe of Benjamin was almost exterminated until the rest of the kingdom got wives for them so that they could continue. So many of them were coming from mixed bloodline. Okay? So 1 Samuel chapter 10 verse 13. Then Shaul finished prophesying and went to the high place. Shaul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where did you go?" To look for the donkeys. Shaul answered, "When we saw they weren't there, we went to Samuel." "Tell me," Shaul's uncle asked, "what did Samuel say to you?" Shaul told him, he assured us the donkeys had been found. he made the story that simple, but a lot of things happened to him there. However, Shaul did not tell him what Samuel had said about the matter of kingship. Now, you would wonder, why would Shaul do that? He experienced the power of God. He was able to prophesy. Maybe he was also wondering what's going on. We're in 1 Samuel chapter 10. Actually, Samuel told Shaul that he will be calling on the people and he must be there. And the Lord will tell why he has to be there. So at least Shaul had a clue because he already had the Spirit of God within him. So maybe he was wondering, what's up with me? What's up with God? What's going on here? So that is why maybe he didn't tell the whole story to his uncle. Yeah. So, however, Shaul did not tell him that matter. So, let's give the benefit of the doubt to this man, even though it's about fear. Now, come to think of it, there are Christians who had marvelous experience with the Spirit of God, and after that, they esteem themselves so high. They think they're already very spiritual. They think they're already are already good. Have you met some Christians who are like that? They were able to exercise some spirit, or they prayed for someone and the person got healed. And for some denominations, they were able to speak in tongues, and all of a sudden they think they're also powerful already, also very special. Now, that is very dangerous when you begin to think that way. Was Shaul showing fear when here in this story, he didn't tell his uncles the whole story. When he kept silent about his unexpected experience with the prophet Samuel, again, we're giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't know really how to explain his side. What really happened? He didn't know how to start because he was surprised at what happened to him there. Did Shaul know how to explain to his family that he suddenly was anointed to be the nation's first king? Probably not. Especially that if it's just him who will tell his family about it. If others would be telling that he was anointed as king, maybe that's one thing. Others are testifying, but he will be telling his family, "I'm the new king." Maybe his family would be laughing at him. Are you kidding me? Are you crazy? You'll be the next king. So maybe he found himself in that awkward situation as well. Would anybody believe him if he told the truth? Maybe not. Would it be preempting Samuel? Well, maybe that's one of the reasons too. It wasn't just one reason. Maybe there's also another reason. Because again, in chapter 10, verses 17 to 19, Samuel told him, "You should show up because I'll be gathering the people and you'll know what's next with you." If he proclaimed himself as king. Now, I'm jumping to verse 20. Samuel was speaking to Saul in this case. And who does all Israel? The context is, Shaul was asking Samuel, "Why are you speaking to me like this? Like I'm so special?" Right? So he responded, "And who does all Israel desire but you and all your family's father's family?" So Shaul responded, "I'm not a Benjamite from. Am I not a Benjamite from the smallest of Israel's tribe? And isn't my clan the least important of all clans of the Benjamite tribe? So why have you said something like this to me?" He just couldn't believe it. Again, as I've said in the introduction to point B, God wanted someone whom He can start from nowhere. That's how the Lord has been raising up judges in the past. Well, maybe except for their first judge, who was I think the nephew of Caleb. He was a great man. But as with others, like Gideon, he was a nobody. He said the same thing. Why are you choosing me? I'm the least among our clan, and our clan is the least among the families in our tribes. So the Lord intentionally chose someone from Israel, the least of the people of Israel. Because God makes someone out of nobodies. That's how God works. Right? Verse 20. So he's now gathering the people here. Okay? And he was about to present Shaul as the new king. Samuel had all the tribes of Israel come forward, and the tribe of Benjamin was selected. So he was doing it this way, how he would be presenting the new king. Then he had all the tribe of Benjamin come forward by its clans. So the clans are sort of the subgroup of a tribe. Actually, I learned that even though people were branded by tribe, actually clans are more important than the tribes, because sometimes it's the clan who lead the tribes. Anyway, and the Matrite clan was selected. Finally, Shaul, son of Kish, was selected. But when they searched for him, they couldn't find him. So he did not appear. He didn't show up in disobedience to what Samuel told him. They again inquired the Lord, "Has the man come here yet?" The Lord replied, "There he is, hidden among the supplies." So he was hiding. So Jonah was escaping. This guy was hiding. At least, you would wonder, why was he hiding? Was he sort of making a surprise grand appearance? I'm not sure. You could look at it that way. Like he was trying to sort of surprise the people, like a grand entrance, something like that. Or was he fearful? Now, for the sake of this argument, I'm looking at this from the point of fear. Rather than making everybody excited, sort of making his entrance sort of dramatic by hiding and all of a sudden showing up, I think he was acting more in fear in this case. Even though God has already empowered him by His Spirit. Though already anointed, Shaul struggled with fear. I'm open to the interpretation that it could be pride as well. Like, again, he wanted to make a dramatic entrance by hiding first. All right. So verse 23. They ran and got him from there. When he stood among the people, he stood a head taller than anyone else. So he was a tall guy. Okay. As Samuel said to all the people, do you see the one the Lord has chosen? So he's asking the question. He's trying to know if the people could discern. There is no one like him among the entire population. So basically, because he's taller, he's describing his physical stature. And all the people shouted, long live the king. So the Lord chose a fearful man from instead of a proud one. Well, God could have chosen a proud one and humbled him. He did that with not as a king, with Samson, and you know the story. So at this time, he was choosing a fearful one. He also tried to choose a fearful one even earlier, ahead of Samson. Again, I have mentioned him a while ago, Gideon. Okay, and he was able to use this man well. So the Lord chose a fearful man, maybe because a fearful man could be easier to mold than a prideful one. I'm not sure, but there's nothing impossible with God. But maybe in this case, that's his decision. Ironically, physically tall Shaul was emotionally fearful. No, imagine, like, in a basketball court, you can't trust a big guy. So the coach would rather put in a brave guy rather than a scared guy, right? So the Lord intentionally chose someone from the least of all the people of Israel to show his power, that he can mold this man to be a great leader if only he will empower him, so that people would not think that Shaul was great because he was physically good or already good on his own. Though already anointed, Shaul struggled with fear. The Lord chose a fearful man than a proud one. Okay? And letter C, the king had to lead with the Lord's power. Now, I will take more time with this one. It will take me 6 sub-points to explain this one, because I think this is the meat of the message. Much more than the expectations of the people from the new king, the Lord wanted to show that he was still their leader through Shaul, though they rejected him. That's in 1 Samuel chapter 10, verse 19. Before Samuel presented Shaul as their new king, he first said to the people that God was disappointed with them, because by asking for a king, they actually rejected God as their king. But still, God is sovereign, and he was the one who would choose a king for them, right? So verse 15 of chapter 9, God was talking to Samuel. Verse 15, now the day before Shaul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel. About this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people. He will deliver them from the hand of the Philistines. I have looked on my people, for their cry has reached me. So you see something familiar with this statement of God to Samuel. This is somewhat similar to the statement of God to Moses when he was in Midian, and he was charging him to go to the land of Egypt and liberate his people from the hand of the Egyptians. But in this case, the role of Samuel was not to liberate them, but to appoint someone who will liberate them. God's plan for Israel was to bless them with a deliverer like Moses. While in the case of Moses, take them out of the land of slavery, but here deliver them from the oppressive people of the Philistines. You would ask, who are the Philistines? The Philistines were probably migrants from Greece. Okay, and if you read Samuel, they have been the constant enemy of the people of Israel, and the reason why the place is right now called Palestine is because the Romans named that place in order to insult the people of Israel. The Romans called it Palestine, coming from the word Philistines, even though the Romans named them when the Philistines didn't exist anymore at that time for hundreds of years. Okay, the Romans came to power, I think, somewhere in the middle of the 2nd century BC, if I'm not, or first century BC. The Philistines have been like wiped out of the map. They haven't been existing 500 years before that. Okay, because they were part of those who were exiled to Babylon. But the Jews were able to come back to their land, but the Philistines were not able to come back. All right, so they were not existing anymore. So the Romans wanted to insult them and let's call this place Palestinian. So that's why the people of Palestine right now are ethnically Jordanians, and some of them also from the north. They're basically Arabs. Anyway, so the people who live there are called Palestine because the place is called Palestine. Anyway, so that was the plan of God, to bless them with a deliverer like Moses. So that was a good promise. That was exciting, that God would continue to bless them even though they wanted another a human king in his place, right? So this is the exciting part in chapter 11 of verses 1 to 15. Nahash, the Ammonites. So the Ammonites are coming from the north. They have been invading the promised land for a long time, even before Israel came there. The Ammonites have been there. Okay, because there were many tribes who were trying to control that land, Canaan, Ammonites, Amorites, for a long time. Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to him, "Make a treaty with us, and we will be subject to you." So they were surrendering to them as long as they make them survive. Okay. But Nahash the Ammonite replied, "I will make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you, so bring disgrace on all Israel." So you have a harsh king here. It's like they're not going to win at all, even though they could survive. But imagine their eyes would be gouged, at least their right eye. So that's a horrible condition from Nahash. So would you accept that kind of condition? So, okay. So, number 2, King Shaul had to show the power of the Lord against foreign oppressors with terror and huge impact. We will see that point in the next few verses. But that's what I would like to arrive. Okay, Shaul will be coming to rescue them against a powerful enemy, the Ammonites, and with a huge impact. Why? Because the Ammonites wanted to really hurt the Israelites by the gouging of the right eye of each one of them. So, will Shaul match their threat? Let's see. The elders of Jabesh said to him, "Give us 7 days so we can send messengers throughout Israel. If no one comes to rescue us, we will surrender to you." Okay. When the messengers came to Gibeah of Shaul and reported these terms to the people, they wept aloud. Okay. Of course, they had to beg mercy. They needed everybody's help, especially their new king. Now, Shaul used to be fearful of his people to lead them as new king. That's what we saw in point B. Now we are in point C. Now he had to remove the fear of the Ammonites from the hearts of his people. Since God removed the fear from the heart of Shaul, he was also tasked to remove the fear of the enemy in the hearts of the people. So Shaul knows what it means to be fearful. And that's why maybe the reason for God choosing him is because as he was delivered from fear, he can also help people be delivered from their fears. That's the role of a leader. And it's very important that we show them that we should fear God instead of fear man. Verse 5, Just then, Shaul was returning to the fields behind his oxen, and he asked, "What is wrong with everybody?" Or with everyone? "Why are they weeping?" Then they repeated to him what the men of Jabesh had said to him. Verse 6, Now when Shaul heard their words, he was fearful. No. The Spirit of God again for the second time. The first time was in verse 10. I'm sorry, that's not Samuel chapter 11, the bottom verse. That's chapter 10. So this the top verse is 1 Samuel 11, 6. The bottom verse is 1 Samuel 10, verse 10. Pardon me for that. Let's read the top verse first. The Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, and he burned with anger. Not he ran in fear. Not added fear to the hearts of people. What can we do? No, I'm backing out. Instead, Lord, I, I haven't been in this situation before. I'm backing out. Why did you make me king? I can't even help these people. No. His anger burned because the Spirit of God was upon him. If Shaul will be left alone without the Spirit of God, he would probably react that way. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But he needed the Spirit of God to be able to be brave and have this righteous anger against the threat against his people. So that's what happened in 1 Samuel chapter 11 verse 6. He experienced the power of God, but at that time, he prophesied. He spoke for God. At this time, he will deliver them as a warrior. So King Shaul had to use the power of the Lord to lead the people, just like the prophets were led by his Spirit. So remember, even in the Judges, okay, so the last judge was Samuel, but he was also functioning as a prophet. Deborah was a judge, and she functioned as a prophet. Some of the prophets didn't really function. I'm sorry. Some of the judges didn't really function as prophets. Okay, Samson didn't speak on behalf of God because he was just so irresponsible. He could have. So, as leaders, my brothers and sisters, elect leaders, we need the power of God. We need to ask God, Lord, I want to be able to help people. I'm fearful or I'm proud. It depends on the spectrum. We talked about this in Lead Like Jesus. I need your Spirit to overcome the fear that I have. Or I need your Spirit so that my pride, so you could take away my pride and I could lead with humility and I could lead with God-given confidence. That's the difference between a leader who leads like Jesus and someone who leads by himself without the power of the Spirit of God. Right? Verse 7, what did Shaul do? He took a pair of oxen, cut them in pieces, and sent the pieces by messengers throughout Israel, proclaiming, "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Shaul and Samuel." Even though he was the new leader, he needed to understand Samuel is still our prophet. He's still our judge. So sort of they were co-leading the nation. Remember, this would be the first physical battle, first war that Shaul would be facing. And he faced it with courage, with bravery, because he had the fear of God. So that he could remove the fear of man, the fear of the Ammonites on the people of Israel. He showed them, you gotta fear me instead. Because I'm the new leader right now by the Spirit of God. And what I have done with the oxen, and if you don't obey me, it will be done to you. Right? So in other words, he was telling them to fear God instead. Through him and through Samuel. If they disobey him and Samuel, since he is now the new representative of God, because they asked for a king, a literal king, a human king. Now you gotta listen to me. I'm now standing in the place of God. If you don't follow us, this will happen to you. Just like what I did to the oxen, you'll be torn in pieces. And therefore, the people got afraid of Shaul and Samuel. Then the terror of the Lord fell on the people and they came together as one. Come on, we better gather there because our new king is calling us. We cannot afford not to face him. If you will look at Judges chapter 19-20, all Israel gathered against Benjamin, and Benjamin did not back off. So, even though they lost, okay, actually there was three phases of the war. The first two, the Benjamites won, even though they were really outnumbered. But on the third one, they were really discouraged. The whole people of Israel and Judah were really discouraged because they were losing to this small tribe, Benjamin, and they had the guts to face all the people, all the nation by themselves. So the Benjamites, they were known also to be very good in slingshots, pinpoint accuracy. So maybe these guys are really tough guys. No? So when Shaul made this threat to the people, you better show up because I'm the new leader here. You asked for a leader and God gave you a leader. You better show up because we're gonna fight these guys. And if you don't show up, you're gonna experience my terror. Okay. I'm sorry. The people of Jabesh Gilead had a choice whether to fear God or the fear of the Ammonites, whether to be united behind King Shaul and Samuel or submit under the Ammonites. Right? They win if they fear God. They win if they follow Shaul and Samuel. In the same way, when we encourage people, we may, in this case, Shaul made a threat. Of course, he's the new leader. He had to sort of sell himself. If you have a weak leader who doesn't speak strong, would you follow him? So, Shaul made a threat in order for them to show up. Now, sometimes that's necessary. Threatening the people is sometimes necessary. Sometimes you don't have to threaten them. But indeed, they show up. When Shaul mustered or gathered them or assembled them at Bezek, the men of Israel numbered 300,000 and those of Judah 30,000. Wow, that's a lot of people showing up. That means they're ready for war. They're ready to come behind Shaul and defend themselves against the people of Jabesh Gilead from the Ammonites. King Shaul himself led the whole nation to rescue Jabesh Gilead from the Ammonites, and that's wonderful. They told the messengers who had come, "Say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will be rescued." Wow. Seeing all of those people, seeing your leader backing you up and all the whole nation, he was able to gather behind him to face the Ammonites. We have all our people behind us, so we will face the Ammonites with courage. And our salvation will come tomorrow. We will be rescued. So that's just very exciting. At last, the fear of the Ammonites will be removed from us. When the messengers went and reported this to the men of Jabesh, they were elated. Wow, thank you so much. This is answered prayer. You know, sometimes you're the leader. You will be the answer to someone else's prayer. You will be instrumental in helping out someone else. And sometimes you will be someone who needs help. And God will send someone for you to help you out, a leader. And you should be grateful. You should be elated when God sends help for you. Right? And acknowledge, God, thank you. I can defend myself. I needed someone else's help. And you have sent a leader for me. Rather than getting to a peace negotiation, unlike Judge Jephthah in Judges chapter 11, verses 12 to 27, he went and negotiated first. Eventually, they didn't have a good negotiation and they went to war. Jephthah, of course, being on God's side, won the war against the Ammonites. Jephthah's enemies were also the Ammonites. So they really had a long history of battle against these people. So when these Ammonites are coming against Jabesh Gilead, maybe this is part of their retaliation. They want to take back. Actually, that's the story with Jephthah. The Ammonites were demanding that Israel take back the land that they used to possess. And Jephthah was saying, no, God has given this to us already. It can't be yours anymore. Anyway, King Shaul had to deliver a strong message through the messengers of Jabesh Gilead. He could not allow them to be bullied by the Ammonites. He could not allow God's people to be bullied by their enemies. But look at the strategy. Verse 10. They said to the Ammonites, "Tomorrow we will surrender to you, and you can do to us whatever you like." Now, why did they say that? Because they're trying to set up the Ammonites. The Ammonites didn't know that they had a new leader. Or maybe they did, but they didn't trust him. Or I mean, this is a new guy. He's untested. He doesn't have war experience. We don't fear this new guy that you have if ever they knew who this guy was. So Jabesh Gilead wanted to surprise the Ammonites who might be less prepared for battle. It's like this. When you know you're about to invade a nation and they already surrendered, okay, you don't really have to exert much effort to fight them, right? It's because they already surrendered. All you have to do is subdue them and take the loot and sort of put some structures to show the people that they're in charge. But perhaps they were not ready for any kind of resistance, because that's what the people of Jabesh said. We will surrender to you, and you can do whatever you want to do against us. Okay, what happened? The next day, Shaul separated his men into 3 divisions during the last watch of the night. Okay, so that is, I think the last watch of the night is about 3 a.m. to about 6 a.m., something like that, somewhere during the time, into the camp of the Ammonites and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. So they were surprised at the surprise attack of the people of Israel. Remember, they had 300,000 from the whole of Israel and 330,000 from Judah. Those who survived were scattered so that no 2 of them were left together. So it was a huge victory through Shaul for Jabesh Gilead. King Shaul had successfully won his first ever battle convincingly. He was a smart guy. He was a smart guy. What a great way to start his leadership. So, in this case, what do you think the people would think about Shaul when they had won the victory through him? Right? Of course, they would admire him. They would praise him. Verse 12, then the people then said to Samuel, who was it that asked, shall Shaul reign over us? Now, this was a challenge. There were people who were challenging the leadership of Shaul. And now the people are saying, is anyone trying to rebel, question the leadership of Shaul at this time? So look at what happened. Turn these men over to us that we may put them to death. Now, these are the potential rebels. These are the naysayers against Shaul. Now you see, he's really our king. He's our leader. He's a good leader. So why doubt him? So if you're trying to not submit to Shaul, we'll put you to death. It's like Shaul didn't have to do that, because his people already would be doing it for him. But Shaul said, no one will be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel. We should be celebrating. We should not be fighting against each other. We should be rejoicing and thanking God. So King Shaul had glorified God for the victory and showed mercy to those who doubted his leadership. So that's a great leader. You don't want to be on a self-destructive mode. Then Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal and there renew the kingship. Why Gilgal? Okay, Gilgal, if you'd remember, was the first town where Israel arrived after they have crossed the Red Sea during the leadership of Joshua. So they were on the other side in Moab. They were about to enter the promised land. God parted the Jordan River. They were able to cross, and they arrived at Gilgal. So it's like, let's start from the very beginning. Let's renew this. We have a new leader here. Let's renew our confidence on this man. So all the people went to Gilgal and made Shaul king in the presence of the Lord. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings before the Lord, and Shaul and all the Israelites held a great celebration. Wow. So King Shaul had proven the Lord has anointed him, as the people validated his kingship. So it's like this. He didn't really have to prove himself anymore. By winning this battle, by leading the people, he has proven to be the new king of Israel. So let's just review all of these 6 points. The king had to lead with the Lord's power. God's plan for Israel was to bless them with a deliverer like Moses, from the least tribe, least of insignificance. King Shaul had to show the power of the Lord against foreign oppressors with terror and huge impact. King Shaul had to use the power of the Lord to lead the people, just like the prophets were led by his spirit. So that's why we need also the Spirit of God in our leadership. King Shaul had to unite the people under the fear of God through his leadership with Samuel. So when we lead, we're really showing the people, I'm just an instrument. It's God who is our real leader, our true king. King Shaul had glorified God for the victory and showed mercy to those who doubted his leadership. And number 6, King Shaul had proven the Lord has anointed him as the people validated his kingship. Wow, what a great story we have here. Now, of course, we remember more Shaul with his failures, but it's fair to say that we should also remember him with the great things he had done, right? Diba? So, there are 3 points. The Lord had to change the heart of the king. The king had to overcome his fears, and the king had to lead with the Lord's power. Sorry, I amended that letter C. The Lord was never mistaken in selecting Shaul to be the first king of Israel. He did supernatural things to change his heart and to enable him to prophesy, to unite Israel, and to defend it. He only had victory because he let the Lord lead him. He couldn't lead the people if the Lord wasn't leading him. And as elect leaders, that's also very important for us, that we lead by being led by the Lord Jesus Christ. As we elect our leaders this May 9, can we ask the Lord to change the hearts of our leaders? Because we don't know who will win. And whoever wins, whether he's a good leader or not, the Lord needs to change the heart of the leaders. Let's ask the Lord for that. If the Lord changes the heart of the leader, we all win. Right? We all win. Can we select people who has the fear of the Lord and will enforce his power, who will use his power in order to lead the nation? I do hope so. So I hope that these 3 leadership lessons will help you, will help us choose the right leaders, and at the same time, we can be all successful as a nation.